Okay, I see her. Okay, got you. Got three participants at least. Okay. I see three. Okay. Okay, we got the right session for sure. How do I get her now? Get her back. There she is. There she is. There you are.
Are we good?
Yes, we are. Good to see you.
Yay.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah, you can get say hi, Wes. That's Rage. Who knows? Maybe for these purposes, I'll turn it around. Yeah, at a certain point, I'm going to turn the camera around, and Rage will be able to join here in person, so you two can talk. And I was just trying to get a screen together here in the room, the one that I mentioned to you just a moment ago on the phone, and our iLearn tech person is here making sure that happens.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Let's see if this does something.
Ah.
All right. That worked. You're on an extended display.
Okay.
So if you want it to mirror. You just click that one there.
Mirror displays. Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. All right. Well, looks like I got everything on my screen though. How do I get all that off of the screen?
You can hide those other things, or if you want to do the extended display.
Okay, so what I'm trying to just make this full screen.
Yeah, right there.
The green one.
Up here.
Yes.
Cool.
Bam.
All right. Okay, now we in business. All right.
All right.
All right. All right.
Thanks a lot, man.
You're welcome. Thank you. And you know what? I'm going to contact you again because this gentleman here is going to be doing the exact same thing here. I'm going to have a Zoom session in this room, and I'll need the displays and everything up. So perhaps I can schedule you to come in and.
So if it's not something Zoom related,
yeah,
and it's more like media and classroom services, that's the team you're gonna call.
Okay.
814-94. They're the ones that do the house calls. This number right
there. Right there. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. All right. All right. Hey, thank you, Sister Nyota, for your patience and
no problem.
And also thank you very much for doing this class for us today. The reason I wanted you, well, I'm going to give a short introduction first for this class, and the reason why I wanted you here is that Black Online is primarily concerned with Black identity formation and social media online, and Black folks as early adopters as in internet spaces and social media spaces. So, you know, we've gone over some things like the Afrofuturist listserv and the notion of the Black identity extremists and things of that nature that have happened here, and how it basically reflects being COINTELPRO 2.0 in the social media sphere, right? And as we have gone over some of those things, the notion of Ferguson has turned up in some of the conversation. Obviously, it would have to. And oftentimes what's happened with the narrative surrounding Ferguson and the uprising in Ferguson is one that's been kind of co-opted by so-called mainstream media, which is a misnomer for white status quo media, and some other left forces too, which I'm going to allow you to go ahead and go into in detail, BLM, et cetera, and so forth. So I wanted you here today for that reason. What a lot of people don't know is that there has been, since the Ferguson uprising, still a good deal of unrest and a good deal of oppression happening to the original activists that were working on the national consciousness in regards to the murder of Mike Brown. And so the police terrorism in that area has been going on for generations, and it still continued after that point, after we watched those outrageous images on the screen. And there was a particularly iconic image of a young man throwing a tear gas canister. And it was just, I believe, a year or so ago that I heard that this young man is now no longer with us.
Edward Crawford.
Yeah, what was his name again?
Crawford.
Edward Crawford.
Edward Crawford, yes.
Okay, and so him, Darren Seals, and others who, Sister Nyota will go into, are no longer with us. And this is just indicative of how, oppressive the forces have been there in Ferguson since the mainstream media sort of took the spotlight and walked away from that area. And so the Sister Nyota is particularly suited for this conversation, not just because she was one of the original activists there, but also because prior to any of that happening, she was one of the earliest adopters of social media spaces and online spaces in connection with hip hop, which we've also discussed before. And so I'm going to have her sort of, go over some of her bona fides and part of her, resume in that regard as an activist and someone who has used hip hop for activism, and her connection with online spaces and tech and so forth. And also in the room with us, we have Wes Rage Soldier, the founder of Race for the Times, and at a certain point, he may chime in as well in regards to those connections as well: activism, hip hop, and online media spaces. Next week, he will be doing a lecture as well, and of course, Sister Nyota, you're invited to comment on his presentation as well. So, without further ado, I'm not going to take up much more time. I'm going to give the space to Sister Nyota, and you can go ahead and give us the narratives.
Wow. One thing I can say is, like, the parallel between hip hop and activism is neither are paths that I chose. I just kind of happened to be in the right place at the right time, or wrong place at the wrong time, depending on how you want to look at it. I started out as a techie, building some of the first hip hop sites: bgirl.com, planethiphop.com, stlhiphop.com. Those were some of the first hip hop sites ever. Like, there are thousands, millions of hip hop sites today, but back then there weren't any. So it's maybe 40 or 50 of us. I know you're familiar with Davey D.
Oh yeah.
He had Davey D's Hip Hop Corner, and it would support online hip hop, and Ill Crew Universal, and there really weren't that many hip hop sites online.
Around what year did you do it?
This is the late 90s, early 2000s.
Right on.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I got my start. I was one of the first to take it from the streets to online to cyberspace, and I'll never forget when I was trying to get people to come online. They were all like, "Oh, online? No, it's about the streets. It's about the streets," and you really couldn't sell them online, for anything. It was about the streets. It was about the clubs. You know, it's about the notoriety in your city, you know, and things like that. It's funny because it's the same parallel that I had with activism. I'll give you an example. Like with Ferguson, actually, I was passing through town. I was going to visit my family. I was coming from California on my way to Atlanta to go do A3C. I had 2 workshops scheduled down at A3C that I'd been planning for well over a year. And I was in St. Louis, and it just happened. You know, Ferguson happened. I'll never forget. I was just working like I normally do online, you know, on social media, on Facebook. And I kept seeing this image. It was kind of blurry at first, you know, and you could tell it was a body, you know, laying on the ground. And I don't know if you guys remember back then, Facebook was notorious for having these viruses where if one of your friends clicked on something, it would go to everybody's page and be in everybody's feed. So that's kind of what I thought it was at first, you know, but then I started seeing more photos and video and people that I knew talking about this, you know, and then it became apparent to me, like, wait a minute, that's happening here. Not only was it happening here, it was happening in Canfield. I had a nephew that lived in Canfield. I had cousins who lived in Canfield. So, you know, I was very familiar with Canfield. And, you know, as the hours ticked by, you know, people started becoming more enraged because the obvious thing was, why is this body still out there? You know, people who didn't even know what was really going on, they just knew there's a Black body laying in the streets and no one is doing anything. You know, so that's kind of what was the catalyst for getting people like really, really upset, you know. And then when they found out that it was a police shooting, that was the moment, like the defining moment where it was going to be something, like there was going to be pushback from the community.
Okay. And so we remember how things kind of started off with there were Twitter feeds happening, you know, surrounding it. It's one of the most amazing things that I had seen in social media at that particular time, of how rapidly the social media started to flame and tick off, and it was like things were happening in the moment, where his body is laying out there, and people are talking about this stuff online. Who were some of the early voices in that particular era? I'm trying to map things out before.
Oh wow,
other
the
forces.
early voices.
Yeah.
Wow, there were so many.
Okay.
Darren, Tori Russell, a lot of the people that you guys know who became prominent protesters with Black Lives Matter, Netta, Brittany. It was so many voices, but you got to understand, like, when we were going through this, it wasn't like anyone was a voice.
I hear you.
Know what I'm saying? It was just the fact that we see this body and everyone's upset about it, and everyone is posting, or they're calling, they're on the phone, or they're going out there.
Yeah.
You know, so it wasn't like anyone considered really anyone a voice.
I hear you.
You know, at that particular time.
I hear you. Yeah. And so basically, it's just people dealing, Black folks basically dealing with their trauma at the particular time.
Yeah.
Such a, an oppressive.
I mean, it was very traumatic, because once you realize that it was a police shooting and it was a young brother, who lost his life, then you're thinking, do I know this guy? Am I related to him? Is it a friend of mine? Or is it like one of my girlfriend's sons? You're thinking, like, how am I connected? Am I connected? And just knowing that, this could have easily been one of my nephews, or one of my friend's sons. It made it really, really personal. Sure.
Okay, and so, of those names that you mentioned Darren Seals, and I'd like to get, an idea from you of, who Darren Seals was, and the narrative leading up to his death, basically, as a result of his activism, probably.
Darren, he had a quiet rage. I didn't know him before Ferguson. But he always stood out, you know, whenever I was out, whenever I was covering any type of gathering or action or anything like that. He always stood out because he always looked like he had this quiet rage. Like really, like you could just see him suppressing, you know, like trying to contain himself. You know what I'm saying? Because I mean, at this time, you know, people really didn't know what to expect. They didn't know that the police were going to push back the way they did. They had no idea the National Guard was going to come and we were going to be going through like what people went through in Selma, you know what I'm saying, in Montgomery and other places. You know, at this point in time, we're just trying to get answers.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? The first night, I actually went down to the Ferguson Police Department. That's where I was. And I was trying to get answers down there. And Darren went to Canfield. And there are photos, there are a lot of iconic photos that came out of Ferguson, but there's a particular photo of Darren yelling at the police. The police have dogs, like the police dogs are barking at the protesters, you know, and the police are holding the dogs back and the protesters are yelling at the police. And that was really the first sense I think that people got that, oh, wow, this is getting ready to spiral out of control. But getting back to where I was that first night in front of the Ferguson Police Department, you could see these different elements coming together, you know, because they were already thinking about how are we going to take this? How are we going to spin this? Who are we going to put forth as faces of, you know? And at the time, like I said, you don't, if you're not really familiar with nonprofits and how they work, you're not even thinking about that. You know what I'm saying? You're just thinking you want answers for the community. You want answers for this family.
Right.
So that's pretty much where our minds were. But, you know, at that time, you know, we had no idea that all of these other forces were conspiring.
I hear you. All right. And at that time, was there any sense that the social media had basically put you all as an image and an incident, you know, basically at least nationally within, you know, an hour or two to, you know, international
Oh yeah, because we were trending, you know, and everything that we were posting was going out. Everything was going viral, you know, so to go through this, you know, in real life, in real time, and then see it playing out, you know, where it's going viral all over the world, you know what I'm saying? At the time when you're going through it, you still don't get that. You know what I'm saying? Because you're living in the moment. You're experiencing what you're experiencing in the moment, but at the same time, it's like reality TV. People are watching. The world is watching.
I heard that.
So it's
yeah. And I can just imagine that it's kind of a tipping point, a shocking tipping point to have the type of oppression that you know witnessed for generations all of a sudden be put center stage instantly like that in a matter of hours. And
it's definitely a wake-up call. What a lot of people don't know is that the day of the vigil, there was a vigil for Mike Brown down in Canfield. That's pretty much when the city got together. Everybody was unified. I never thought I would see unity like this in St. Louis, like ever, you know, but everyone was unified. You know, everyone was down there and, you know, people were gathering, you know, for Mike Brown, and just because they were sick and tired of being sick and tired, you know, that even more so. So everyone was out there and, you know, things were going fine. And then it was time to leave. And I happened to be one of the first people, you know, to venture out from Canfield to West Florissant. I don't know, did you come to Ferguson?
No, I did not. No.
Okay, well, Canfield is off of West Florissant, which is the major street. And it kind of like enters into the parking lot of the Canfield apartments where Michael Brown was shot. So to get back to West Florissant, you have to go through the parking lot, through the neighborhood, you know, and travel, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3, 4 blocks, you know, before you get to West Florissant. So by the time I got to West Florissant, you know, and I'm turning off of Canfield into West Florissant, it's like I just walked into a war zone. There were police everywhere.
Wow.
you know, everywhere, unbeknownst to people who were still at the vigil. Like no one even knew they were there, but they had us boxed in. You know, they
Oh.
already had us boxed in. There were cars lined up around, across the street, so you couldn't even, like, if you drove, you couldn't even get out. You know, they had us just boxed in on all sides. You know, and then they're standing there, you know, with the doors open, with their weapons, you know, aimed at us. So
Uh-huh.
imagine walking out and having no idea that they're even there.
Yeah.
You know, and then you just walk into this.
Yeah.
You know, and they're just there and they're not saying anything. They're not giving any orders. They're just, I mean, the terror. I
Yeah.
felt terror because I didn't know what was getting ready to happen.
I hear you.
You know, and so more people are coming out, as you know, people are leaving the vigil, and this is like the scene they're walking into, and there's a lot of anger because it's like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and instead of the police saying, you know, leave, you know, or, you know, this is an unlawful assembly or whatever, you know, they could say, they just stood there and started approaching the crowds, you know, with their arms, you know, they were armed,
I hear
SWAT
you.
gear,
Uh-huh.
you know. So at that point in time, you know, I'm, you know, walking towards the police because actually I'm trying to get out of this area, but they're coming towards me. And so I'm just asking them, like, is there someone we can talk to? You know, are there any orders? You know, what is going on? Why are you guys closing in on us like this? And there was just no response. You know, when I finally got a response from a police officer, he just told me to move. Shut up, move. That's it. I actually was on the outsides, you know, trying to walk towards my car. But there were, I don't know, maybe hundreds, maybe even 1,000 people behind me, you know, who were still coming out of this vigil who had no idea this was even going on. So that's what they walked into. And it was like a really tense standoff, you know, for a moment, you know, and then Ferguson police, they backed away. They left. And so the people started celebrating, you know, like, wow, you know, trying to get out of there. And then next thing you know, St. Louis County police come and they just swarm in, you know, and it's the same thing, you know, and it was, I can't even tell you how long this went on because it just seemed like time stood still.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're just shocked, nervous, you know, surprised, angry, scared, you know, in fear of your life.
Yeah.
You know, and people, they responded, you know, in typical fashion. You know, they were upset.
Sure.
You know, there was a police car that tried to drive into the crowd, you know, and the police car ended up getting, I don't know if they turned the police car over or what, because by this time I was able to get to the edge and get to my car, you know, and try to find the people that I came with, you know, and then almost like nothing, just everything stopped, like they left again. So people who are coming out of the vigil is people who never even knew this happened. You know, they just came out and they felt the energy. They had no idea what was going on. Okay.
Okay.
And later that night, that's when the Quick Trip burned.
Oh.
That was that day.
Oh.
Because as more people were coming out and then word started to spread, there was a lot of misinformation about what was going on. But people were enraged. I mean, that whole experience, like I said, I don't even know how long it actually took because it seemed like time just stood still, you know. That set it off.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Wow. So then this goes on for a period of time, and I'm going to let you say how many days or hours
Wow.
it took before not just the press but other leftist groups started to descend upon Ferguson. And also along with them, you know, the celebrity activists, you know, the Spike Lees and, you know, Sharptons, et cetera, and Jesse Jacksons, people like that. You know, perhaps you can give us an idea of what was the grassroots reaction to these, you know, national figures descending upon Ferguson. And as I remember, I think it was like Jesse Jackson and people like that I remember first showing up and trying to get spotlight. Spike Lee and people like that started running their mouth.
Yeah. At first, you want to think that they're there because they want to help, because they see what we're going through. So you're really, open and receptive to listening. But I think we were out there maybe a couple of weeks, before all these other forces started coming in, to play.
Okay.
I remember I worked with Jihad Muhammad from The Final Call. Rewrote the first national piece about Ferguson, and it appeared in The Final Call. And back during that time, it was important.
Say the gentleman's name one more time. That's important.
Jihad Muhammad.
Jihad Muhammad and yourself wrote that first national piece.
Yes.
Okay.
And we wrote it for The Final Call. It was important to us to have that to have it published in a Black publication.
Okay.
To have it published so that we could control the narrative. And that's how handsupdon'tshoot.com came into play, because it was we could already see just the way the local media was covering it, and even some of the Black media, the local Black media was covering it. It was a lot of false narratives, a lot of false information that was going out, so, it was important to us to control our story, and to make sure our voices were heard. Now, at the same time, we started becoming national news, international news, and that's when you started seeing the celebrity come in. Al Sharpton came first. I'm not sure if he was invited by the family, but I know that he was there with the Brown family. I remember protesting out on West Florissant when Jesse Jackson and who else came with him? It was Jesse Jackson, and it was, I think, Lacey Clay. They came together.
Okay.
And they ran them off. It was really interesting because people, they already felt some type of way about Jesse Jackson.
Sure.
They felt he was an opportunist, and they felt that he was only there because the cameras were there. Because by this time we'd been out there weeks, going through this stuff for weeks, and no one was responding to us. And then all of a sudden, here he comes, and of course there are cameras and everything down there, and he goes straight to a camera. Lacey Clay goes straight to the camera. They're not trying to figure out what's going on with us, or to even let us know that they're there for us. So, I don't know, as the days, progressed, you started seeing this celebrity element, being added into the mix. I lost track of all the celebrities who came. I mean, oh my God, from Benzino to, there were so many. It was kind of it became this thing, what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, like the Source Awards or something. You just had to be seen there. You know what I'm saying? Like, seriously.
Yeah.
They came and they got on the radio and they got a lot of national exposure.
Yeah.
And they left.
Right.
That was it. They came, they took exposure, from and some of our momentum, and they just left with it. No one was like, okay, we're here for you. Even the ones who stuck around, like Talib Kweli. He was there for his own personal benefit.
I hear you.
He wasn't there to help us. He was there to be seen. He had his own agenda, which is why when you see him on the news, he's really extra. He does things to stand out, to make the news, to make headlines.
Yeah.
And that's really what the celebrity activists brought. Really, they didn't bring, they took, they subtracted from what we were doing. You know what I'm saying? They weren't adding anything, they were subtracting, because then it became about them, and a lot of them started to latch on to Ferguson activists, to people who were from the community, because they needed that credibility. They needed that, yes, we're standing in solidarity with them, type of moment. So that's how a lot of people who were on the front lines, with the rest of us, became these prominent, protesters. And we're all looking like, wait a minute, how are they speaking for all of us? They don't speak for us. They speak for themselves. They don't speak for us.
Right.
You know, and then when Black Lives Matter came, I actually met I met them when they came.
Okay.
And at the time I didn't even know where they were from. There were so many people, you didn't know if they were people who lived here, people who were from out of the state, people who were from different cities in the state. You just saw people coming and going. You know, but what really stood out about them was just the level of access they immediately had. And I know this because I happen to be in these different circles.
Okay.
You know, so when you see them come and, you know, they're in meetings, you know, with people that, you know, I'm working with, we're from here, you know, this is our movement, but you guys are in a closed door meeting. I can't go into the closed door meeting, you know? So I'm like, well, why can't I go into the meeting? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was like the first sign that something was really not right. You know, that they were getting ready to co-opt this and install leadership, because we had no leaders. There were no leaders. You know, people were just doing. People got in where they fit in. You know, there were no leaders. There were no spokespeople. You know, if people wanted to do interviews, they did interviews. Most people didn't. You know, so they decided that they were going to get these people like the Nettas, the Britneys, the Tefcos, the Tory Russells, all these different people that you can go back and you can see, you know, who just suddenly came out of nowhere and were deemed, you know, leaders of our movement.
So what type of closed door meetings would these be? Is this something where they would be getting with the gatekeepers like city council members and, you know?
Well, there were different meetings. There were meetings they were getting, oh wow, there were meetings with, for example, OBS, the Organization for Black Struggle. They're actually the organization that opened the door, that put out the rallying call for all these other orgs to come. OBS, you know, had been trying to get into certain movement circles for the longest time. So this was kind of their stepping stone into, you know, the upper echelon of nonprofits. Okay, so then they also had meetings, you know, with city councilmen, the Black elected leaders, different people. A lot of people don't know, up until this point in time, we had a Justice for Mike Brown leadership coalition, and that's when you had Black leaders, the Nation of Islam, nonprofits, the clergy, all working together in unison. But when Black Lives Matter came and all of these different nonprofits came, it's like everyone got their own little mascot, you know, and so this person is working with this organization, this person, you know, is a mascot for this organization. And from that point, the money, you know, became a big issue, a major issue, because we went from, you know, barely being able to afford water, you know what I'm saying, when we were protesting, to throwing huge rallies, you know, like Ferguson October. And so people were questioning, where is this money coming from? You know, you have protesters who couldn't afford gas money, you know, who were suddenly traveling to Palestine. You know, how does that happen? You know, you have people who were unemployed, you know, who were suddenly, I mean, makeovers, you know, sitting at the White House, you know, so people were wondering, like, okay, how does this happen? How are you guys picking these particular people? Why are they going? Why are they the voices? Because there are people, if we were going to have voices, we would select these people. You know, we would not select Netta.
I hear you.
You know, we would not select Tef Poe. We would not select Tory Russell. You know, we have people who have been in these trenches even before I was born, you know, who were better equipped and better qualified, you know, to speak on the issues that we were facing.
Understood. So one of the narratives that BLM brought with them is one that the organizing thus far in Ferguson had excluded women or had excluded LGBTQIA people, et cetera, and so forth. Can you speak to that? Because this is one of the...
I mean, none of it was true. There were female voices. I was a voice. Netta was a voice. Brittany was a voice. Alexis was a voice. Tracy Blackman was a voice. Jamala Rogers was a voice. Jamila Nasheed, Senator Jamila Nasheed was a voice. Senator Maria Nadal Chappelle was a voice.
Wow.
There were plenty of female voices.
Okay.
You know, Black women had a voice. You know, no one was suppressed. No one cared if anyone was gay or straight. We didn't have those divisions.
Understood.
You were a voice simply because you were there.
Understood.
So that's how it was. You know, it didn't matter if you were young, old, Black, white, gay, straight. None of that mattered. You know, you were out there and you were standing in solidarity, you know, against oppression. And that's really all that mattered. The division didn't come in until Black Lives Matter came. You know, and then they started separating us, gays from straights, you know, the totally minimizing the voices of straight Black men. That was purposeful. You know, brothers like Darren Seals, you know, they minimized his voice. And at the same time, they were amplifying D-Ray's voice. And a lot of people didn't know D-Ray isn't even from here. You know, he just came out of the blue. You know, he came because he saw us on TV like everyone else. And suddenly he became a voice. He became a voice because, you know, he was more articulate. He was more acceptable, you know, by the mainstream media, more so than Darren Seals, you know, and he had the right connections. You know, he was out of Teach for America, you know, which is, you're familiar with Teach for America.
Yes, I am.
So it's like, they got him with Brittany. They paired them together because both of them were out of Teach for America. And then they threw Netta in the mix so the D-Ray would have this Ferguson credibility, you know, and that's how the world was introduced to D-Ray.
Yeah.
I mean, but if people...
Baltimore, isn't he? He's actually from Baltimore, isn't he?
He's from Baltimore, but I think he was in Minneapolis before he came here.
Okay.
You know, but basically, you know, he got on by tweeting while we were out getting tear gas. He was in somewhere, I think in Minneapolis, tweeting about what we were going through.
Yes.
And when you're getting tear gas and chased, you know, by the National Guard and dogs, you don't have time to tweet.
I heard that.
You know, you don't have time to tweet. So the next thing we knew, I mean, he was just anointed a leader. And people were like, who is this? Where did he come from? Who sent him? You know, do you know him? You know, that's what we're asking each other. Like, who the hell is he? Right. You know, like, seriously, because it's like all of these people just started coming out of the blue. I remember the first time I saw the women of Black Lives Matter, you know, on TV, talking about, you know, how they started this movement. And we're all like, what? Wow.
Yeah.
Like, who are these people? I mean, a lot of people don't know, but Black Lives Matter was only here 3 days.
Wow. I want you to repeat that.
They were here 3 days. I know this because I have their itinerary.
Okay.
3 days.
I hear that.
Know? And this itinerary will be available on handsupdon'tshoot.com.
Okay.
So people can go check it out and they can see exactly what they were on when they came. And it wasn't about justice for Mike Brown. You know, that was never their agenda. It was a means to an end. And that end was co-opting a movement, taking credit for our efforts to push for other issues, you know, to rally for other issues, LGBT, immigration, feminist issues, other issues, use our momentum, use the funding that was coming in, that was generated to build their platform.
Sure.
You know, and at the same time, they had to push brothers aside. How do you take a movement that is built on the blood of Black people, specifically Black men, and you ostracize them? And you insert who you want to insert there, you know, and then you just deflect from that point. Yeah. So that kind of, no, I'm not going to say kind of, that did start a rift between Ferguson and Black Lives Matter. And that's something else that people never knew, because most people think we're all the same. We're not the same.
Understood. Yeah. So one of the things that has happened broadly, I'm just trying and contextualize this in a broader historical context, is that even as far back as the 20s, 40s, et cetera, and so forth, there's been certain oppression, it's anti-Black oppression that's happening in the United States. And then there's a white leftist contingent that may attach itself to it, maybe a Marxist contingent in like the 30s and 40s, et cetera, or coming into the 1960s, there's a leftist contingent that is latching itself onto the civil rights movement, and by extension, the Black liberation movement writ large, which has at least three components. There is the civil rights component, the international Pan-Africanist movements that were going on at that particular time, and those folks that were just Black nationalists as well, and so who are advocating for separation or an independence. And so what happens is that there are these leftist factions that come in and try to do what I consider to be a divide and rule in regards to that ideologically. And post 1970s, we've seen, or in the early 80s with the culture wars, we've seen the rise of the notion of intersectionality in campuses and in graduate studies classes, et cetera, and so forth. And there are good things about intersectionality and being able to understand the complexity of certain crossing and intersecting oppressions as a way of an analysis. But what's happened is that there's now come a kind of an intersectional hierarchy, or intersectional I'm saying an intersectional hierarchy, and even an intersectional orthodoxy, wherein if you are not following these hierarchies, then you can be easily tarred and feathered or accused of being homophobe, transphobe, sexist, et cetera, and so forth. And by that, they mean that you are unfit for struggle. And they can actually edit you out of struggle in doing so. And Wanda Coleman, the poet, some time ago, had made a statement about the way people were being tarred and feathered in the 1970s and 60s, where anybody who was a Black nationalist could be tarred and feathered by white leftists as a racist or being divisive, and you're unfit for struggle. Well, now there's a new kind of tar and feathering, and what she said is that this tar and feathering was a way of people, quote, piggybacking on our pain. And so I see this as a technique that's happened, in a broad sense in the 20th and 21st century. I'm wondering if you could speak to how it is this notion of intersectionality has sort of taken over the very notion of Black liberation struggle.
Oh, it's totally taken over the struggle. That's what Darren Sills spoke out about the most, was intersectionality. Once he began to understand like the concept and what was actually happening, to our movement, because it went from, brothers like him being the voice, brothers in the community, who were out there protecting, businesses and doing different things and just really standing up, and taking their place in the forefront, when it came to facing oppression, facing, like, getting in these police officers' faces, like literally in their faces.
I hear you.
And I lost count of how many people, especially young brothers, who have died. So when we talk about these issues, it's very personal. We know people this happened to. Some of the victims are family members. I had a cousin who was shot and killed by the police. So it's very personal to us.
Yeah.
And then to have, our pain and just even our voices dismissed because someone wants to talk about LGBT issues, or someone wants to introduce immigration in the mix. I mean, There's a time and place for everything.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but it's not to come and co-opt what we started,
Exactly.
what we're doing, still our momentum.
Exactly.
You know, start your own movement.
Yeah.
You know, you can't step on us, you know what I'm saying, in this hierarchy to get where you're trying to go.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, you know, what happened. That's exactly what happened. The movement today, it's you can hardly even recognize it. You know, it went from, you know, that iconic photo you spoke about earlier with Edward Crawford, Skeeter, to, you know, white clergy. You know, you have a black person on the bullhorn, but he's surrounded by white clergy, you know, members. And it's like, what happened here? You know what I'm saying? And even, I mean, when you look at the national movement, you know, not just here, not just BLM, like even with sports, people like to credit Cap, you know, with the NFL protests, but that actually even started here with the Rams. They did hands up, don't shoot.
Right.
You know, and they got a lot of grief for that. And ultimately they ended up leaving the city. You know, they relocated back to LA, you know, but you look at it now, you know, Cap is like this iconic figure based on what? You know, he didn't increase our visibility. He's not making more people aware. Where have you been if you're not aware, you know what I'm saying, of police brutality?
Right.
You know, so it's like it's become commodified, you know what I'm saying? It's this thing that's now sold. So now what are you going to do? Go buy some Nikes? Right. You know, is that going to be your revolution? Or are you going to go see Black Panther? You know, you're going to buy a movie ticket, you know, and go see Black Panther. You know, they're basically taking our struggle and they're selling it back to us. They're repackaging it and they're selling it back to us. And many of us are buying it. Right. And meanwhile, we're still out here getting killed. And and many of us, many of the Black masses especially, are believing that is protest. You know, I'm gonna support Nike, and that's a radical, somehow or another, a radical statement. And this is another thing that's kind of come up since social media and since a certain, you know, era. There was a tipping point at a certain point where spectacle and protest and spectacle was then read as being radical. You know what I'm saying? And so that's how people can get online and start doing hashtags and things of that nature, or, you know, quote unquote, supporting Nike or going to see Black Panther and thinking that that's a radical act. But people don't know where all of that is based. Like there is actually a conference that's held every year. It's called Netroots. And they teach this. They teach narratives. They teach how to push certain narratives, how to deflect, how to change the conversation. You know, when you're talking about let's say you have an issue with your movement being co-opted, you know, and resources funneled to the LGBT community, then they're going to call you homophobic. Right. You know, these are actual talking points. They learned this. This is what Netroots does. Yeah. You know, I know this because I don't even know why they would even put me on their media list. You know what I'm saying? But they put me on their media list. So yeah, I have screenshots, you know, of the website where they're talking about these different, I mean, like literally how to do this, you know, how to hashtag, you know, how to take the momentum. I mean, everything. I mean, and once you realize like how deep this goes and how calculated, you know, a lot of people like to think that it's oh, well, they're young, or oh, well, you know, this movement is young, or, you know, they like to think that it's innocent. It's not innocent. It's very, very calculated. You know, and people don't understand there are hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. Understood. Yeah. You know, hundreds of millions that never reaches the community. Never reaches the community. Getting back to Darren Seals, I stumbled upon this document from a nonprofit that itemized all this money that was coming into Ferguson.
Okay.
I mean, all kinds of money. And it was the first time that I was able to make a connection between George Soros's Open Society Foundations and elements within the movement, because up until that time, it was the connection was always denied. And people always said they didn't get any money. They didn't know anything about any money. You know, no one knew anything, you know. But when I stumbled upon the document, you know, I posted it. And Darren reposted it. The difference in me posting it is I like to hide things in plain sight. Darren was very different. Darren was very in your face, you know, and when he read this document and he saw all of these millions and he saw the names of people that he knew getting this money, you know, and people denying that money even existed, you know, he went ham on social media. You know, he was in their faces. You know, he was tagging people, he was calling them out, you know, everything, you know, posting the document, you know, and even Michael Brown Sr. came in and commented on the post. And people can check this out, you know, it's still on Darren Sills' Facebook. You can also go to the Hands Up Don't Shoot Facebook page.
Okay.
Where I have a screenshot of this exchange between Darren and Mike Brown Sr., Tory Russell, Tefpo, you know, where Tory Russell is denying that this money even existed.
Wow.
You know, before having to come correct, you know, because it's a very detailed list. You know, it was the link is still there from the actual source. You know, it's on their website.
Okay.
You know, so this is them telling you where all this money went. I think people didn't really understand that these organizations have to account for this money, you know, and a lot of them put these documents up online. So if you know what to look for, you can stumble upon these, you know, and the people who are getting the money have no clue, you know, and that's kind of what happened. But Darren was found murdered just a week later.
Wow. Okay. So that was a part of the narrative so 1 week after posting that information is when he was found. And from what I understand, both shot and burnt in a car. Is that correct?
Yes. In his truck. I mean, beyond recognition, like there were just, everything was just gone. It was just gone. His body was, everything was gone.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So this is, I've said before that this is always one of those indicators when it's anybody in it, whether it's in the international context or in this small microcosm, when the powers that be, when the status quo tries to completely obliterate the body of a certain voice or a certain radical, that radical was a threat to the system. You know, and it could be anything from Dorner, that cop that was running around. They tried to basically get rid of his entire body for some reason or another, unnecessarily, to, you know, Osama bin Laden, his body, I believe, being chopped up and, you know, or, you know, Patrice Lumumba. It's the same thing. It's like they try to burn him up like a Mission Impossible tape so that there's absolutely nothing left there to examine and get certain narratives from. Probably because they realize also that if there's something there that, like CSI or something, one could come in and determine who the persons was that murdered them by examining the way their body was, you know, but the way that they were killed.
And to this day, no one has called for an investigation into the murder of Darren Sills. Not one prominent protester, not Black Lives Matter, not D-Ray.
Wow.
Not even the protesters turned elected officials, you know, not even Wesley Bell, who beat Bob McCullough, you know, as he's the new county prosecutor. You know, he hasn't even said that he will reopen the investigation into the murder of Mike Brown or indict Darren Wilson. You know, so these are not cases that people want solved.
I hear you. Yeah, so certain people are incentivized to tell the lie of omission just by not mentioning those names. You know, it's interesting, you know, like you said, Cap ain't saying nothing about Darren Sills or the people that have died post Ferguson. You know, I
Yeah,
haven't
you
really-
hardly hear any talk about that. The only time it comes up is when there's another mysterious death.
Mhm.
You know, then it's news for a few days and then it's back to normal.
Yeah, understood. Okay, so and we can come back to some of the events of Ferguson and the powers, you know, surrounding it at some point. But what I really like for you to also give us is, you know, some of your background with hip hop social media platforms and your experience with being an early adopter leading into your newest project now, and you know your vision for that.
I started off on the old mp3.com. I don't know if you remember that or if any of your students are even old enough to remember that.
MP3.com.
This was the late 90s, early 2000s. It was like really the first social media platform, but it was a music-based social media platform. mp3.com was actually the company that introduced MP3 technology. So back during that time, they were partnering with artists and they were allowing them to create CDs, and they would partner with them. mp3.com would handle the pressing and the distribution, and they would split the profits with the artists 50-50, you know, the artists providing the content, you know, and at the same time, they had streaming and they had MP3 downloads. So they were allowing artists to like really make money. You know, this is at a time like if you were an artist, you were lucky to get $1 off of each CD sale, you know, if you had a record deal, you know, so imagine being able to get 50%. And what made mp3.com, what made labels like really look at them and say, oh, this has to stop, was when Master P decided to join mp3.com. You know, and he brought his label, you know, Limit, over to mp3.com. So he's just making all kinds of money, you know, off of MP3s and streaming and all of this stuff, which is really what changed the record industry. This is like 20 years ago.
Okay.
You know, so the labels were not liking that at all because they were still trying to squeeze out $18 a CD, you know, and give artists $2 or $3, you know, off of a CD. And now here's this company that has global reach because it's online, you know, and it's partnering with artists. You know, it can create the CDs or it can do MP3s and streaming. 20 years ago, okay? So yeah, mp3.com was a problem. So, you know, the label started suing mp3.com. They started ganging up, and mp3.com would win. It was a small company. Like, it wasn't a big company like Facebook with thousands of employees. You know what I'm saying? It was very small. I was a hip hop music director. I got brought in by Paradise from the X Clan, who was the director of hip hop, you know? So, you know, my job was basically just, you know, hip hop. You know, I was living the life. I was a techie. I loved hip hop, you know, tech. Oh my God, I was in heaven, you know, and until the music stopped. And the music stopped, you know, when the label started, you know, they just kept suing. And ultimately mp3.com lost. They lost because of this technology they created that was called Beam It. And what Beam It was is you could take any CD that you purchased and put it in your CD drive, and it would beam it into like a format that you could stream online. So you could create your online crates, you know, without having to take all your CDs with you. You could just log into mp3.com from anywhere and have access to your whole CD catalog.
Wow.
So they got sued for that, you know, for all types of copyright infringements and everything. And they ultimately lost. You know, mp3.com was a small company. It didn't have as much money as Universal, you know, or any of those larger companies. So what ultimately happened is the labels ended up taking over mp3.com. And what was interesting is when Nelly came out with Country Grammar, you know, that was the first single that the industry really used mp3.com to push. mp3.com at that time was worldwide. It was like the Facebook of that era, way back when, you know. So everyone was familiar with country grammar. You know, we pushed that, I mean, worldwide for a year before the album even came out. And that's why when the album dropped, it ended up going like 9 times platinum. 9 times platinum. And you would think that type of success, that the industry would have been like, hey, we might have something here. You know what I'm saying? But it was the exact opposite. You know, their thing was, we're going to push these $18 CDs.
Wow.
You know, so what they ended up doing was breaking mp3.com into little pieces, selling the domain, you know, selling the infrastructure, selling the catalog, you know, licensing to different companies, you know, and that was the end of that. Little did I know at that time that Microsoft was looking at me, you know, and I had Microsoft contact me. I'll never forget. Imagine just checking your email and you get an email from Microsoft, like, wanting to give you a digital distribution deal. At this time, you really don't even know what a digital distribution deal is. You know what I'm saying? But it's Microsoft, so you're definitely gonna listen. You know, and that's how I ended up getting the first digital distribution deal in hip hop. It wasn't Puffy, it wasn't 50, it wasn't any of them. It wasn't Russell, it was me. They gave me the same deal they gave CD Baby, the Orchid,
Wow.
a lot of these other online companies. You know, we had access to everything, walmart.com, MTV France. You're talking 15, 20 years ago. Okay.
Oh.
You're not talking today. You know, you're talking pre-iTunes, pre-Spotify, pre any of this. None of this existed. So imagine the monopoly that Microsoft had, you know, and they were pushing all of this through their Windows Media Platform, through Windows. And if you have a Windows PC, you know you have Windows Media Player. So that's how I got involved with MP3s. And then from there, all of my platforms originally started on the old mp3.com, bgirl.com, stlhiphop.com, planethiphop.com, unsignedhype.org. All of those originally started as platforms, as stations, actually, on the old mp3.com. And from when I hooked up with Microsoft, you know, then my stations became part of Windows Media Player. So you could go in Windows Media Player like 15 years ago, you know, up into, I think maybe 2 years ago when Microsoft just stopped doing the online streaming as far as radio goes. But yeah, I've had stations, you know, there all that time.
Excellent.
So it I don't know, man, when you're going through this and it's happening to you, you have no idea of how big things are until after the fact.
Okay.
You know, you can look back on it and it's like, oh, wow, because when I had stations, you know, in Windows Media Player, I remember STL Hip Hop Radio was featured on the main page, you know, the day Michael Jackson was killed. I mean, the day he was murdered. Well, I'm not going to say murdered. The day he died. Let's say that.
He died.
Okay, the day he died.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was really major for me. You know what I'm saying? Because it crashed the service to my website, you know, and everything. Because when Microsoft features you, you're featured on everyone's computer, you know, everywhere simultaneously, you know, and I was not prepared for that. And, you know, having that type of access, you know, and trying to, I don't know, use it to impact the streets and where hip hop was at that point in time, it was difficult because people were still about the streets. You know, I remember telling people, hey, I got this deal, digital distribution, MP3s, Microsoft, hey, we getting ready to do this. You know, I was in St. Louis at the time. And people were looking at me like, you're talking about that free stuff. No, we're not doing MP3s. It's about this. This is when they were burning their own CDs, you know. So no one wanted to hear it. I mean, it's hard being ahead of the curve, you know. And just to see where the music industry is today, we were here 20 years ago. You know what I'm saying? 20 years ago, we were at this point.
Wow.
You know, so imagine where we would have been, you know? And it's even hard for me today because knowing what I know and watching the different trends and and how mp3.com came and went. And back then we never thought mp3.com, you know, would go by the wayside. You know, watching MySpace, you know, I'm sure you remember MySpace.
Yeah.
And MySpace was huge. It was like a Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, and we never thought that MySpace era would end, and MySpace ended. And now we're in a different era. It's Facebook and Twitter, and people don't think this would end, you know. And I tell people all the time, build off of social media. Like, don't get so comfortable with social media that you think that you can just build and be there forever, because it's not going to be there forever.
Right.
And one of the things that was really interesting to me about social media, especially today, was the way that we were tracked during Ferguson through social media, through these hashtags. You know, they're telling us, oh, create a hashtag for this, create a hashtag for that. But when you do that and you're out there protesting, they have these programs, you know, that will track you, you know, for law enforcement. You know, and Facebook is in on this, Twitter is in on this, you know, they're all in on this.
Yeah.
You know, so I remember, you know, protesters talking about going out on actions and being bum rushed, like the police were waiting for them. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
That's why that happened.
Because they can track you like that.
Yeah, they can track you. They know exactly where you are, you know, everything. You know, they can affect your devices.
Yes.
You know, they can do all kinds of things to your devices. I had my tablet just go on the fritz. You know, they can erase content. They can erase videos. You know, they can do all of that. You know, people think when you say stuff like this, they think you've been a conspiracy theorist, you know, but no, they do this.
I saved the quote, and I'll let you continue to talk. This is just so interesting to me, because during the time when Occupy was in Oakland, Daryl Gates, the guy that created Stop and Frisk back east, he was on NPR talking about his new company that he was basically going international with, going around to different police departments internationally, particularly to learn how to suppress and to police the social media aspect of activism, like on a global scale. This guy was going to Europe and to Brazil and these different places. And ultimately, you know, the Oakland City Council hired him as a consultant, you know, to Oakland for something like $100,000 for a month or two's worth of work. And, you know, and certain Black city council members voted for that, you know, in the midst of police terrorism going on all over the country. So I'm just saying that to say that, no, this is not a conspiracy theory to the point where people even have to make anything up. The police departments and figures like him have been saying this openly. You don't have to go.
I mean, during Ferguson, police were stating this.
Yeah.
There were articles out, you know, and I remember going on Facebook and telling people about these hashtags, about how problematic they were, you know, and how easy, you know, it was for us to be infiltrated, you know what I'm saying? And just someone come and they have us, you know, following this hashtag, you know, or posting that hashtag, or tweeting this or retweeting that. And all they're doing is like marching us into, you know, 1984.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like into like all of this surveillance.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
I'll give you another example. There's a PDF, and this is also available on handsupdon'tshoot.com. I don't know if you remember Antonio French. He was one of the prominent protesters. He was an alderman
I do.
of St. Louis. Okay,
Yeah.
him.
I do.
Very, very big, you know, and in cahoots with the police when it came to this surveillance.
Yeah.
You know, video surveillance all over the city. You know, and people didn't know this.
I didn't know that about him.
People did not know this, you know, exactly. And a lot of these people that, you know, were propped up, you know, were very problematic, and people don't know that, you know. And when people like me were screaming, when people like Darren was screaming, you know, hey, no one wanted to hear it. You know, everyone wants to believe that this is an organic movement by these three sisters who started it, you know, and I mean, it's a beautiful lie. you know, but it's not based in reality,
Mhm.
you know, and the real story, you know, is not beautiful at all. It's very tragic,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely.
and even to this day, you know, we're done. We just had a Ferguson protester die like maybe a week and a half ago. I don't even know if it was that long ago. Bassem.
Basim.
Yeah, he passed away.
Wow.
And we really don't know what happened because anything could be anything. They could tell us anything. You know,
Right.
you don't know.
Yeah.
You know, but I always wonder what are the statistical odds of these particular people
Hmm.
who were involved in this movement,
Hmm.
you know, all, you know, dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that's something you have to look at.
Right.
What people don't understand is like this never ends for us. This doesn't end for me.
I
You
hear you.
know, I have to worry about certain things. I have to move a certain way. You know, it's constantly looking over your shoulders.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, I was contacted by Russians. You know, people think all of this stuff is just stuff that they say. No, I was actually contacted by Russians who were trying to uh, figure out my location. You know, they told me they were working on a documentary, you know, about the Ferguson protest. And they
Wow.
wanted to talk to me about Darren Seals.
Wow.
And they wanted me to come to them, or they wanted to come to me, and they promised not to tell anyone where I was. You know, and it was really funny because I'm like, you know, I'm the type that, you know, I'm giving them enough string to hang themselves. Like,
I hear you.
you know, I'm asking questions, and, you know,
I
you
hear you.
haven't even given me an email. Like you're just
Wow.
talking to me. Like, what is this? You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And it was funny because I'll never forget, I was actually on the phone with this Russian producer, and I was talking to her, and I was stating that, you know, you keep getting at me. First of all, I don't even know who you are. I don't know where you are. You know, you keep talking about this documentary, but I haven't seen even so much as an email about this documentary. You
Wow.
know, and while I was on the phone with her, she sent me a PDF, like at that exact moment. And I'm
Wow.
just like, what? You know what I'm saying? So I'm looking at this PDF, and they're really laying it on thick. Yeah, we want you. We got Kendrick Lamar. We got Angela Davis. I am serious. That's what they were, you know, trying to push to
Wow.
get me to come out of where I was, you know, come
Wow.
out of hiding,
I hear
you
you.
know, and deal with them, which of course I didn't.
Good.
You know, so you get this.
Yeah.
You get
Yeah.
people who
It's
they'll try it.
Yeah, I was going to say it's one of the ways of controlling us too is that I think the status quo understands that uh, people, oppressed people want visibility. When
Yeah.
you've been dehumanized, then you want visibility and seeing yourself in a prominent place, either on the screen, you know, writ large,
Hmm.
or in print, things of that nature. And so they dangle that in front of us in order to coax us
I
out.
mean, it works for some, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a revolutionary.
I feel you.
That's not what we're on. You know
I
what I'm
hear you.
saying? That is like
Yeah,
the last thing you want.
exactly.
You
Exactly.
know, like I told you before, I have to move a certain way.
I get it.
Uh,
I get it.
no, I don't want that type of visibility.
I hear
You
you.
know, at all. I don't even want to be in the position that I'm in right now. You know, this is something that I was thrust into. You know,
Yeah,
this is not something I chose to do.
understood.
You know, this is something that happened that impacted my life. Um, my life has changed so drastically, you know, in the past 4 years, especially, you know, in the past two, you know,
Hmm.
after Darren was murdered.
I hear
You
you.
know, things get really real.
I
You
get
know,
it.
you don't know who to trust.
Hmm.
You have a lot of people who reach out to you.
Hmm.
You don't even know who you can trust within your own movement.
I hear you.
You know, you let alone the opposition.
Right.
You know,
Yeah. So that's a
so
really good point to make when people look at the students look at the site and they see your pseudonym. They know why you travel by a pseudonym and speak by a pseudonym.
you have to, and that, you know, I had to go through a lot with Facebook,
Okay.
because they want all of your personal information.
I hear you.
You know, and it's like I don't have that luxury. You
Hmm.
know, I can remember going back and forth with Facebook before Darren was murdered.
Hmm. Okay.
You know, And then you think about the Cambridge Analytica scandal, you know, where Facebook, where all of like people's information,
Yeah.
you know, were sold.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, who knows who has my information? You know what I'm saying? And Russians found me. Where do you think they found me? They found me on Facebook.
I hear you. Yeah. And I'm glad that you invoked George Orwell in 1984 because, and maybe I'm going to close out right about here and give the one or two people that have some questions, or Brother Rage wants to chime in real quick. But what I'll close out with is that Orwell talks about, you know, the control of narratives and the fact that, you know, once you have gathered all this information, the way Facebook and social media has, it's not in any material place. They can mix and match, destroy, you know, recreate any type of narrative, and doing so recreates reality. So that the generation that is born, that is looking back at what the historical narrative is, has no idea what the actual reality is.
No idea. And they can totally erase you. They can erase me tomorrow.
Erase you completely.
Like, gone.
Yeah, and because we become dependent on that, again, because of our need for, as oppressed people, for visibility, in the visual field as well, all of our photographs are not in albums. They're not in material places anymore. People aren't taking Polaroids or actual photographs that go in an album and sit someplace. There was a brother that did a documentary on photo albums. He was traveling the country talking about these Black family photo albums. And what he's saying is that there is a better cultural history and evidence of photographs of Black people taken in the 19th century, moving into the 20th century, but mostly in the 19th century, than there is now. Because there are no photographic albums. There's so much that has been destroyed, and how very little has been documented to begin with, because it's all on some electronic cloud somewhere, and it's volatile. It can all go in an instant.
Or, you know, on the flip side of that, it can all be duplicated.
Yeah.
You know, and sent who knows where.
Yeah. Yeah. This is true. This is true. Say, I want to make sure that anybody that might be online, I see Rachel online, hoping Adiba might still be online, can chime in with any questions that they might have for Sister Nyota. And of course, Brother West, Rage Soldier is here, the co-founder of Race for the Times. You can make any comments that you'd like to make too. As a matter of fact,
you got a chat.
Yeah.
Message. That's a question.
No, that's a private chat. I think that was from Adiba. So, yeah. You can go on.
Might have to squint it down a little bit taller than brother.
Yeah, you're much taller.
I see. How you doing?
Pick it up, tilt it, do whatever you want.
What's going on? I just want to say that just hearing the whole story that you told us sounds just so familiar. I mean, from checking our history of our movements to what we experienced in Oakland with Oscar Grant. We're still going through right now. Yeah, exactly. And man, it's just so similar. They do the same tactics, the same type of things.
Just blueprint.
Yeah, build upon them more so than ever. And just a quick synopsis on where we were when Ferguson was going down. I mean, we've had maybe 10 iterations of our website over the years. And at this time, I had 2 accounts on Facebook. I had my personal account, and then I had my Rage Soldier account. And we had Race for the Times. We had rebirthed it on Facebook. And so once we heard about Ferguson, I think that first day, people were sending us messages. And I was blessed to have been connected with a lot of people on Facebook on my Rage account. People were just sending me stuff like, yo, post this. What about this? And so on our website, we created I can't remember what we called it. I think we called it a Ferguson or something. We just had a page that we post to it. So people just could go to one page and all the updates were there in order. And
oh, wow.
And this is the most popular our website ever got. Because you remember maybe the first week, there was no national coverage. They mentioned it, but there was no coverage.
Right.
You had no idea what was going on. And this was also before Facebook Live happened.
Right.
So everybody was using live stream and everything else.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember just watching live stream all night. I'll just be sitting there watching it, writing stuff down, taking notes, posting stuff, screenshots. And I think once it became national and it became kind of like news all the time, our website went down. And we learned more about it later, but we were actually attacked.
Wow.
Oh, I'm sure you were.
Yeah, and our website was basically gone for a year. We had to change posts and everything. We've only even told this story a couple of times. And then around that time, Facebook started enacting the I don't know what you would call it, but basically the activist rules. Where they're like, prove who you are. What's your real name? Send us your ID.
Yeah.
And so they shut down my Rage account.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I told everybody. So they gave you like a week or something. And I told her this before when they first started shutting down accounts. And I lost so many contacts and connections and
you
stuff.
You lose everything.
Yeah, and then at the same time, they start throwing our posts on Facebook. This is all the tactics they do nowadays, all the time. But you know, to this day, we post something that other people should like this. You know, 5 views. You know, whether you post something that's not that important, a lot of people see it. So, I was going to say also about the live stream is you look at the history of our movements and our work. They're co-opted, they're changed, and we push technology and everything else with it, you know, kind of like what Oscar Grant did. The much use of live streaming that Ferguson did made Facebook adopt live streaming. That's basically why there's live streaming on Facebook. Yeah. You know, wow. And the people don't think about all these things that come into play.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
It's in how companies benefit.
Yeah.
You know, Facebook made a lot of money off of Ferguson.
Oh, hell yeah. They made a lot off of Ferguson.
Yeah.
They probably grew a lot off of Ferguson.
Yeah, of course they grew a lot. I mean, Ferguson was the most popular hashtag ever.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Them hashtags weren't really popular until Ferguson happened.
Yeah.
So that's what's
so there was a lot of that. Like I said, when you're going through this, you don't even look at it like that, you know. You're just trying not to drown in it, you know, for real. But you have these forces that are, you know, external. Yeah. And they're like dollars, you know, whether it's the nonprofits, you know, or companies like Facebook, you know, they're looking at ways to capitalize.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you're saying with mp3.com and Facebook. It's like, I've always said that Black people push technology. We're the ones.
Yeah.
We the ones who adopted MP3s. They didn't.
Yeah.
You know, they just
we're the
got
ones
the
who were burning CDs.
You know, we're the ones who start using live streaming. Hey, look, you know, I'm doing this right now. Not them, but they capitalize off of it and push it. So we still see this happening right now with Facebook and everything else. So that's why.
I see Rachel. I see Rachel over there. You have a
hey,
question?
People, I just wanted to show my face so you knew I'm not a Russian, like spying on you. Right now, I'm a Blaxican over here in Oakland. I've eaten the way.
How you doing, sister?
I'm good. Hey, I've just been listening to the conversation as I'm doing other things in my house today, and it's frightening, and it just reminds me how important it is to be careful where we get our information from. So I just really appreciate this firsthand narrative because it's nothing I've ever heard before. A lot of the things that you were saying are things that I have not heard before. I mean, I'm not completely in the dark. I know that evil exists, but I just really appreciate hearing from you. And for Dwayne for hosting this so that, you know, others could hear this as well. I appreciate the work you're doing.
Oh, wow, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You just never know, you know. It's been 4 years, and there are a lot of stories that no one has heard. You know, that's part of the reason that I do what I do, to give voice to the grassroots, you know, people who took to the streets and just regular people in the community.
Exactly.
Because otherwise, you know, all that people will have to go on is like the Black Lives Matter narrative. And that's it.
Yeah, that's pervasive here in Oakland. I have to say that it is. And yeah, I'm not really a joiner. I've never had any social media except now I have Nextdoor just to figure out like some of the stuff. And I know I've missed a lot by not being involved, but also hearing everything that you're saying. I'm also glad that I maybe have some minute level of anonymity. I don't know though, because there's so many places where I sign in with my Google account, right? I know they're tracking everything. So
everything, sister.
yeah.
They're tracking everything.
I just want to leave you with this, and then I need to head off to class soon, is that I was listening to a sister friend of mine speak on a panel, also a recording earlier today, and she reminded me, and I'm going to remind all of us, our ancestors prepared us for these days. Like, right? Some people are like, what the hell is going on? I don't know what, you know, and I want to hold that as my mantra. My ancestors prepared me for these strange days in a lot of ways that I didn't even recognize until these things are unfolding, right? If your grandparents,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, like those family stories prepared us, right?
They prepared us, and it's what got me through Ferguson. Like, really, it is. Like, if I didn't have that, you know, to build up on, I don't know if I would have made it.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you so much. I'm gonna sign out now.
Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
My tape back on my camera here. Bye.
Heard that. Yeah. All right. Well, sis, we're coming up on the 3:30 time frame. And that's when I was about gonna cut it off. And this before the whole thing's been recorded, and I'm gonna get that file to you, and you know, put that on whatever medium that you're working on now. And any of the students that were unable to attend now will be able to see that in the weeks to come. Yeah.
Okay, one last thing, if I can include what I'm working on now.
Sure.
All Black Media Network. And that's just because so many Black voices, you know, are being, you know, minimized, you know, pages deactivated, accounts shut down, you know, across all social media platforms, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. You know, it's getting to the point now where, I mean, if you say certain things, you know what I'm saying, that they will cancel, they will X you out. So it's very important, you know, that we have our own. And so one of the things I'm working on is the All Black Media Network. It's allblackmedia.ga is where I will be posting updates about that. We have the RBN network, which is a working prototype. We still have to set up servers and archive like thousands and thousands of videos from YouTube and podcast sites and things like that, because if these accounts get shut down, then all of that is gone. You know, it's just gone. So we have to back up all of that, you know, so that requires servers, you know, bandwidth, you know, because it is our goal to host all these files, as well as have 24-hour live streaming, you know, where we are our own CNN, you know, where we are the voices, you know, and that will be online. It will also be an app. We're also expanding to Alexa, Amazon Fire TV, Roku. So we're using technology, you know, where we can level the playing field. All right. You know, we can put our information out. Another thing that we're working on is our own social media platform. That's really, you know, for revolutionaries. It's not like a Facebook where it's anybody, you know what I'm saying? It's small. You got to know somebody, you know, to get in there, you know, and it's where we're going to be able to come together and have these conversations that we can't have on Facebook. I heard you know, that we can't have on social media. You know, where people can get together and we can start coming up with solutions and how to move forward.
Beautiful. And that's the word I love to hear is solutions. One thing occurred to me when you just mentioned that. What is your global outreach, or have you had the opportunity to do so with like-minded people? Say, I'm a Pan-Africanist, so this is the first thing that comes to mind for me is, you know, folks on the continent or in the diaspora.
Well, yeah, I work with Dr. Ronaldo Anderson. He does BSAM, so he travels all over the country. You know, he was just in, I think he just did Europe, Berlin, Rome. Yeah. He's been to Africa. He's been all over the continental U.S. You know, BSAM is it's an event, Afrofuturism, you know, based event. Yeah. BSAM
so basically I'm just gonna say BSAM stands for, just for the
Black
student.
Speculative Art Movement.
Yeah, Black
So you can go to
Speculative Arts.
blackspeculative.artsmovement.com. Yes. So we are combining art, activism, and technology and media. I'm also working with Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. In the spirit, of the Black Panther newspaper. We have to control.
Right.
And for more information about that, you can go to savethehamptonhouse.org. That's where our studios will be located, in the childhood home of Chairman Fred Hampton Sr. So
that's dope.
A lot going on.
Yeah. Yes,
we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. And thank you so much for being such a diligent worker. Your work ethic is admirable, sister. That's why spent some time trying to reach out to you, because
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Right on.
You're appreciated. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and close this session. And of course, you and I'll be talking offline whenever you want to. But,
okay.
Again, thank you so much for a priceless historical document that you've given to this class.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a good day. Peace. Go to this. All right.
That's right.
All right.
Peace.
Peace.